Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Alright, let's dive into the madness that is Nurgle, the chaos god of decay, disease, and despair. But Nurgle isn't just another god of destruction. No, he represents something far more insidious, an eternal cycle of rot and decay that isn't just about the physical world falling apart. It's about the psychological and spiritual decay that infects everything in his path, leaving only despair in its wake. For Nurgle, there's a twisted form of beauty in the slow, inevitable collapse of all things. He doesn't just want to destroy, he wants to watch the world fester, grow sick, and wither. His idea of growth is a grotesque one, where disease and rot flourish unchecked. Nurgle's world isn't one of chaos and sudden destruction like his brothers. Instead, he offers a slow, almost nurturing corruption, a disease that spreads like a creeping fog, taking its time to consume and transform. It's through this gradual corruption that Nurgle has gained his twisted following. His devotees aren't rushing to a quick death. No, they embrace the inevitable, knowing that in the end, Nurgle's rot will consume everything. It's in this acceptance of decay that they find a sort of twisted peace. And it's here, in this horrific embrace, that the true horror of Nurgle lies. His power isn't about an immediate death. It's about the slow, tormenting realization that no one escapes his grasp. Now, imagine a world, one of Nurgle's plague worlds, that exists in both the material and immaterium realities. A planet so thoroughly corrupted, its very existence bleeds into both dimensions. This isn't just a world plagued by disease. This is a world where reality itself begins to warp and twist under the influence of Nurgle's eternal rot. These planets are more than just infected. They are living, breathing examples of the corruption that can span realities, existing on the thin line between what is real and what is not. In the 40k universe, we know the immaterium as a place of raw psychic energy, a dimension where emotions, thoughts, and beliefs warp reality. But on a plague world, the line between this twisted dimension and the material realm can become almost non-existent. You might be standing on the surface of a planet, feeling the harsh winds and the corrosive atmosphere, but a single step into the wrong area could send you hurtling through the immaterium itself, caught between the two realities. These worlds don't just exist in one place. They straddle the line between life and death, reality and madness. So what happens when a planet is so corrupted it becomes a liminal space? What happens when it exists in both realities at once? That's what we're about to explore. This is the twisted domain of Nurgle, a realm where nothing is sacred, and where the decay of both mind and matter form the foundation of existence. And it's here, in this rotting reality, that we begin to uncover the answer to the question: can a planet truly exist in both realities at once? Let's find out. The realm of Nurgle is one of the most unique and terrifying parts of the Warhammer 40k universe. When we think of chaos gods, the first images that might come to mind are those of terrifying warriors, burning cities, and planets on the brink of annihilation. But Nurgle, the plague god, doesn't work that way. His realm is not one of fiery explosions or violent upheaval. Instead, it's a place of slow, agonizing decay, where every corner is infected with rot and pestilence, and where nothing can escape the inevitable touch of time and death. In the immaterium, the realm of pure psychic energy, Nurgle's domain exists as a vast, grotesque garden. Picture this: a sprawling, endless expanse where the air is thick with disease, the skies churn with clouds of plague, and the land is suffused with the stench of decay. This is not a garden of life, but one of rot. The flowers here are not vibrant and beautiful, but are twisted, decaying specimens that bloom with sickness and death. There is a perverse serenity to it all, as if Nurgle's very presence creates a sense of permanence in the decay, a twisted comfort in knowing that decay is inevitable and, in his eyes, even desirable. Nurgle's influence on the material universe is insidious. Unlike the other chaos gods, whose manifestations tend to be more immediate and violent, Nurgle works slowly and patiently. His power seeps into the very fabric of reality like an unseen plague, gradually corrupting everything it touches. It starts small, just a single virus, a stray mutation, a forgottenness, but before long, it spreads, creeping through planets and galaxies until entire civilizations are brought to their knees by pestilence and disease. One of the most terrifying aspects of Nurgle's influence is how it pervades not just biological life, but entire ecosystems. It's not just about sickness, it's about the slow, relentless breakdown of everything that once stood firm. Nurgle's rot isn't just something that afflicts the living, it changes the very landscape, the very soul of a planet. The air becomes toxic, the ground turns to mush, and even the stars above seem dimmed by the weight of his influence. Where once there was life and growth, there is now only stagnation and decay. And what's even worse is that Nurgle's influence doesn't need to be direct. It's not like Tzeentch's manipulations or Khorne's warlike fervor, where you can fight back with strength or strategy. Nurgle's power seeps into the very bones of reality itself. It's in the way a planet's immune system weakens over time, the way natural disasters start to become more frequent, or the way crops start failing. It's in the whispers of the people, the sense of despair and inevitability that settles into their hearts. Even the most advanced technology can't escape his touch. Machines, once pristine and perfect, rust and rot under his influence. It's as if the entire universe is slowly but surely becoming infected with his plague. And yet, as horrifying as this might sound, Nurgle's followers see this as a gift. To them, decay is not something to be feared or avoided. It is a part of life. It is a natural process. Where others see disease and decay, Nurgle's followers see rebirth, transformation, and a twisted form of immortality. To serve Nurgle is to embrace the inevitable, to accept that nothing lasts forever, and that decay is the only true constant. The plague may kill, but it also transforms. It brings change. It brings a new kind of life. And in this way, Nurgle offers his followers a form of twisted salvation, one that comes with the understanding that their bodies, too, will one day be overtaken by the rot, but that it will not be the end. It will be a new beginning. Across the galaxy, there are countless examples of Nurgle's influence taking root. Entire planets fall under his sway, not through massive invasions or fiery battles, but through slow, creeping corruption. The once thriving worlds of the Imperium turn into desolate husks, their population decimated by disease. Some planets become breeding grounds for the most horrific forms of life, where plagues evolve and mutate in ways that no one can anticipate. The inhabitants of these worlds, whether they are humans, Xenos, or even Chaos worshippers, find themselves unable to escape the inevitable. They can fight back for a while, but in the end, Nurgle's slow, unrelenting advance always wins. What makes Nurgle's corruption so insidious is that it doesn't just affect the body. It affects the soul, too. Those who succumb to his influence often find themselves losing their will to fight. They become resigned to their fate, their minds warped by the realization that decay is the natural order of things. They may not even see it as a curse. Instead, they accept it, even embrace it. And in this acceptance, Nurgle finds his greatest strength. It's this pervasive nature of decay that makes Nurgle so dangerous. His power doesn't need grand schemes or flashy displays of strength. It simply needs time. Time to rot everything it touches. Time to break down the very structure of reality itself. And as time passes, Nurgle's domain continues to grow, expanding across the galaxy, infecting everything it touches. As the decay spreads, so too does the power of Nurgle. And the more that reality is corrupted, the more Nurgle's influence will continue to seep into the material world, until there is nothing left but his endless, eternal rot. When we talk about the Immaterium in the Warhammer 40k universe, it's easy to imagine a chaotic, unpredictable space, one that exists beyond the boundaries of time and space as we know it. The Immaterium is a dimension of pure psychic energy, where emotions, thoughts, and beliefs manifest into raw power. It is a place of endless possibility, but also endless danger. It's a world where nightmares come to life, and where the rules of reality are twisted and bent beyond recognition. But what happens when the Immaterium and the material world, the realm we call reality, begin to bleed into each other? This is where the concept of dual realities comes into play. Imagine a planet that is so thoroughly corrupted by Nurgle's plague that it's no longer just part of the material universe. It exists in both realms at once, straddling the line between what is real and what is not. On the surface, it may appear to be just another world, perhaps even one that is forgotten or overlooked by most of the galaxy. But look deeper, and you'll find that the planet is slowly, inevitably becoming a gateway between the immaterium and the material universe. The idea of dual realities is as terrifying as it is fascinating. In essence, these are worlds that are infected not just by Nurgle's corruption, but by the very nature of the immaterium itself. On a planet like this, reality becomes unstable, fractured. Time bends in strange ways. The laws of physics falter and break down. Gravity might pull in the wrong direction, or the weather might behave in entirely unpredictable ways. And yet, despite all this, the planet is still tangible, still real in a sense. The surface is still made of solid matter, the air still breathable, at least for those who are lucky enough to be unaffected by the pervasive corruption. But just beneath the surface, the immaterium waits. It seeps into every crack, every fissure, every breath of air. It begins to warp everything it touches. Where once there was a clear boundary between the material universe and the immaterium, that boundary starts to blur. Space becomes warped. You might step into a forest and find that the trees are no longer rooted in the material world, but have roots that stretch deep into the immaterium itself. Or perhaps you enter a building and find that the walls pulse with energy, as if alive, as if they are made of something far beyond mere stone and mortar. And it's not just the physical environment that is affected. The people, the creatures, the very essence of life on the planet begins to change. Those who are exposed to the immaterium's influence begin to see the world differently. Their senses are no longer confined to the material. They can perceive glimpses of the immaterium, flashes of horrific visions, and unnatural presences. Perhaps a soldier might walk through a field and see the ground split open, revealing the horrors of Nurgle's own garden beneath it. Or a farmer might look up at the sky and see it ripple, as though the very heavens are a shifting, wretched mass of disease and decay. These visions aren't just illusions, they're glimpses of the other reality that the planet is now occupying. They are the immaterium forcing its way into the material world, becoming part of it. Fan theories about these dual reality worlds often focus on the idea that Nurgle, in his infinite hunger for decay and rot, is trying to fuse the material and immaterium realms. Some believe that Nurgle's ultimate goal is not just to corrupt and spread his diseases throughout the galaxy, but to create a permanent bridge between the two realms. In this view, the dual reality planets are not merely accidents, but part of a grander scheme, one that Nurgle has been working toward for millennia. The idea is that, by corrupting the fabric of reality itself, Nurgle can ensure that decay and death are no longer confined to the physical universe. They will spill into the immaterium, making it a place of perpetual rot, sickness, and despair. Others suggest that these worlds are like stepping stones, early experiments, if you will. They believe that Nurgle is testing the boundaries between the material and immaterium, trying to create a stable connection that can be used to further his influence. If these worlds can exist in both realms, then perhaps Nurgle can expand his control over the entire galaxy, using the immaterium as a gateway into every corner of reality. This would make his power limitless, unstoppable. The immaterium would no longer be a distant, chaotic force. It would become a part of everything. The boundaries would vanish, and decay would be inevitable, not just in the material universe, but in every conceivable realm. And yet there are those who wonder if Nurgle's influence over these planets isn't just about spreading decay, but about creating something new. What if these dual reality worlds are a form of twisted rebirth? As the material and immaterium bleed together, could something new emerge from the corruption? Some fans speculate that Nurgle's ultimate goal is not to end the galaxy, but to transform it into something else entirely, something that is both alive and dead, both real and unreal. In this view, the immaterium is not a place of chaos or destruction, but a place of transformation and growth. A garden where Nurgle's plagues are the seeds of a new, horrific world. As much as the idea of dual realities is a concept tied to Nurgle's corruption, it's also a terrifying reminder of the power of the immaterium itself. The chaos and instability of that realm are not just abstract ideas or distant forces. They are real, tangible forces that can invade the material universe, turning everything upside down. When a planet exists in both realities, it's no longer just a place on a map. It becomes a living, breathing paradox. something that cannot be understood by the laws of science or reason. It becomes a place where decay and life coexist, where time and space are fractured, and where Nurgle's eternal rot reigns supreme. The very idea that such a planet could exist, straddling the line between what is and what could be, forces us to confront the horrifying reality of Nurgle's power. It's not just about disease or decay, it's about the nature of reality itself. What happens when the material world can no longer keep the immaterium at bay? What happens when a planet is not just corrupted, but fundamentally altered by the forces that lie beyond the veil? The answer, it seems, is that we don't know yet. But the journey into these dual realities will be a one-way trip with no turning back. In the Warhammer 40k universe, some worlds are nothing short of tragedies, and they exist as clear examples of how Nurgle's influence can warp reality itself. There are planets so thoroughly infected by his presence that the boundaries between the material world and the immaterium blur, creating a horrifying dual existence. These worlds are living, decaying monuments to the plague god's power, each one serving as a testament to his ability to alter the very fabric of reality. Take the planet of Gyron II, for instance. Once a thriving colony of the Imperium, this planet has become a grotesque bastion of decay under the weight of Nurgle's influence. At first glance, it might look like just another war-torn world, ravaged by conflict. But over time, the planet began to rot in ways that couldn't be explained by conventional disease or decay. The air itself began to fester, thick with the fetid stench of pestilence. Vegetation withered away into strange, gnarled, diseased plants that seemed to pulse with an unnatural life, almost as if they were feeding off the very essence of the planet's soul. And the ground of Gyron II, was no longer just dirt and rock. It became a sickly swamp of corrupted earth that seemed to shift and move as though alive. But it wasn't just the physical environment that had been corrupted. The very nature of time seemed to warp on Gyron II. Days didn't pass in a regular cycle. Sometimes the planet would experience weeks of endless daylight, other times a darkness that felt endless. Time seemed to stretch and contract, as though the very laws of physics were buckling under the strain of Nurgle's presence. For those who lived on the planet, if you could call it living, they spoke of strange visions, flickers of alternate realities. They would be walking down a street and suddenly find themselves in a different version of the city. A warped, decayed version where the buildings were broken and rusted beyond recognition. They felt as though they were slipping between worlds, as if Gyron II was straddling the material universe and the immaterium. Then, there's Mortarion's own world, Barbarous. It's the birthplace of the Death Guard, and it serves as a horrifying example of how Nurgle's influence can shape an entire planet. While Barbarous is not directly a dual reality world in the same sense as Gyron II, the planet is a perfect example of how Nurgle can taint the very nature of existence. Barbarous was a world of perpetual darkness, a planet covered in swamps and poisonous mists. It was a place where life itself struggled to survive. But after Mortarion fell to Nurgle, the planet's very atmosphere became a breeding ground for disease and corruption. The air was thick with toxic fumes, and the land itself was twisted by plague, where even the mountains were covered in diseased mists that seemed to seep into everything. What's most terrifying, however, is that the planet's corruptive nature has spread beyond the physical realm. Barbarous exists as a place where death is a constant companion, where decay is the natural order, and life is merely a fleeting, ephemeral thing. The very essence of Barbarous was bent and shaped by Nurgle, altering its reality so that it was no longer just a planet in the material realm. It became a reflection of Nurgle's own domain, a mirror of decay and rot, existing somewhere between the material world and the immaterium. Then we look to Talaros, a world so steeped in corruption that it's said to exist in a permanent state of flux. Talaros was once a thriving world, a beacon of progress in the Imperium, known for its technological advancements and powerful defenses. But when Nurgle's influence began to spread across the planet, everything changed. The air became thick with the stench of rot, and the oceans turned black with the spread of disease. The once advanced cities fell into disrepair, their inhabitants stricken with plagues that could not be cured. But it wasn't just the living who were affected. Talaros itself seemed to change. as though the planet was no longer wholly part of the material world. Those who entered certain areas of the planet would often report seeing visions of a twisted, decaying version of the world. The sky would ripple, as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart, and the streets would warp, bending into impossible angles. It was as if Talaros was slowly slipping into the immaterium, becoming a world where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. The inhabitants of these worlds often experience a form of madness, a madness that seems to be a side effect of Nurgle's corruption. Some claim that they can hear whispers in the wind, voices from another world that speak in a language of decay and death. Others report seeing shapes and figures that don't belong to the material world, demons and horrors from the immaterium that are somehow able to manifest in the physical realm. These entities appear to be drawn to the planetary corruption, feeding off the power of Nurgle as the boundaries between worlds begin to collapse. Some fan theories suggest that these entities are actually the manifestation of the dual reality effect, flesh and soul torn between two worlds, existing in both at once. It's not just the planets themselves that are affected by this dual existence, though. The inhabitants of these worlds, whether they are human, mutant, or xenos, find their minds warped by the influence of the immaterium. The constant exposure to Nurgle's power can drive people mad, as their perception of reality shifts and distorts. Some have even claimed that they experience entire lifetimes in a single moment, caught between the slow decay of the material world and the chaotic horrors of the immaterium. For them, time no longer flows in a straight line. Their minds become fractured, torn between two realities that they cannot escape. Some speculate that these planets may serve as experiments, either for Nurgle himself or for other chaos gods who wish to see the limits of reality tested. If Nurgle can create worlds that exist in both realms, what could this mean for the future of the galaxy? Some fans argue that these planets could become a focal point for chaos, a means of pulling the material universe closer to the immaterium, allowing the forces of chaos to spread their influence even further. After all, if a world can be both real and unreal, what's to stop the immaterium from swallowing the entire galaxy? The idea that these worlds exist in both realities at once is a terrifying one. It means that the boundaries between what we know and what lies beyond could be far more porous than we realize. And as Nurgle's power continues to spread across the galaxy, we might see more worlds fall into this state of decay and madness, straddling the line between the material and immaterium in ways we can barely comprehend. If Nurgle has his way, the galaxy itself might one day become one enormous festering wound, existing in both worlds at once, a true reflection of the plague god's power and influence over the very fabric of reality. When we talk about Nurgle's corruption, it's easy to imagine a world filled with plagues and festering disease. But the true horror of his influence goes far beyond just the sickness that afflicts the population. Nurgle doesn't just spread disease in a localized way. His power affects the very fabric of reality itself, causing entire ecosystems, landscapes, and even climates to shift and warp. The result is a world that doesn't just become sick. It becomes a twisted reflection of Nurgle's domain, where the very nature of life and death is twisted beyond recognition. Let's start with the landscape. Imagine a planet where the ground itself seems to be alive, but not in the way we usually think of life. The soil isn't fertile. It's rotting, decomposing, constantly shifting and collapsing. The earth might look like it's made of decaying flesh, pulsating with the rhythm of a living organism, its surface slick with the oils and fluids of corruption. Where there were once towering mountains and rolling hills, there may now be giant mounds of infected matter, constantly shifting and growing. It's as if the planet itself is sick, as though it's been infected by a virus so powerful that it begins to eat away at the very foundations of reality. What once was solid Earth is now a quivering mass of decay. The vegetation on these planets is just as monstrous. Nurgle's corruption causes plants to wither and mutate, transforming them into grotesque, fleshy aberrations. Where there were once forests full of vibrant trees, you might now find twisted, diseased plant life that no longer follows the rules of biology. These plants might grow rapidly, their roots sprawling like veins through the planet's crust, feeding off the corruption that flows through the ground. Their leaves may no longer be green. They could be a sickly yellow, brown, or even black, covered in pustules and sores. These plants are no longer merely organic. They are living embodiments of decay. They might drip with fluids that ooze out like pus, or even produce spores that spread sickness wherever the wind blows. The whole ecosystem has become a reflection of Nurgle's influence, a garden of rot and death. Even the atmosphere of these worlds is affected. The air itself seems thick with the stench of decay, a constant cloud of toxins and noxious fumes that pollutes the very air the inhabitants breathe. This is no ordinary pollution. It's the manifestation of Nurgle's power, a miasma that seeps into every corner of the planet. On some worlds, the atmosphere might even become so saturated with pestilence that it begins to warp the very laws of physics. The air could feel heavy, oppressive, almost like it's pushing down on you, as if every breath you take is suffused with the very essence of death. It's as though the planet itself is choking on the corruption it has absorbed. The natural cycles of the planet, once predictable and reliable, now become unpredictable, tainted by the rot of Nurgle's influence. But perhaps the most horrifying aspect of these worlds is how this corruption affects the climate. It's as if Nurgle's influence doesn't just stop at the planet's surface. It reaches into the very atmosphere, altering weather patterns and creating unnatural, disease-laden storms. The skies might constantly churn with dark clouds, swirling in violent patterns that don't obey the laws of nature. The planet's once temperate climate could become a series of extreme, unpredictable weather events, unending rainstorms that seem to wash away the land with disease-laden torrents, or blistering heat waves that bake the land into cracked, lifeless deserts. On these planets, nature no longer follows the rhythms of life. Instead, it becomes a chaotic, rotting mess, as if the very essence of the planet has been poisoned by Nurgle's influence. Some fan theories suggest that these planetary changes are not just a side effect of Nurgle's corruption, but a deliberate part of his plan. These worlds are not merely infected, they are being transformed into living, breathing representations of Nurgle's vision of the universe. To Nurgle, decay is not something to be feared, it's a process of natural rebirth. The constant cycle of death, decay, and rebirth is the essence of life in his eyes. In fact, many believe that Nurgle views the entire universe in these terms, that everything is eventually doomed to decay, and that this decay is the true purpose of existence. These planets, slowly becoming more and more like Nurgle's own realm, might be a means for him to accelerate that process, making the entire material universe into a reflection of his dominion. Some speculate that the very act of transforming a planet in this way, making it exist simultaneously in both the material world and the immaterium, could be Nurgle's ultimate goal. By causing the planet to exist in both realities, he could ensure that the rot and decay of the immaterium are brought into the material world, spreading his influence even further. This could be seen as an act of creation, an attempt to merge both realms into one, making them inseparable, so that the influence of chaos and decay would be permanent. The very laws of nature would be bent, twisted into something new, a world where reality itself is in a constant state of flux, forever in a state of decay. As Nurgle's corruption spreads, it's not just the physical planet that's affected. The creatures that live on these worlds, the inhabitants, the flora, and the fauna, are all tainted by this corruption. These beings might mutate in grotesque ways, their bodies warping and changing as they are overwhelmed by the disease that festers around them. Some might even embrace Nurgle's influence, becoming twisted servants of the plague god, their minds warped by the constant exposure to his power. Others, however, might be driven mad by the relentless decay, their bodies succumbing to the sickness until they become little more than walking husks. The very nature of life on these planets is altered, twisted, and corrupted by Nurgle's presence. For the Imperium, these worlds are a nightmare. Not only are they physically diseased, but they exist in a state of flux, straddling the line between reality and the immaterium, constantly shifting and changing. Some fan theories suggest that these planets could be used as a foothold by the forces of chaos to invade the material world. Others believe that these worlds might eventually become fully consumed by the immaterium, a fate that would spell doom for any who inhabit them. The corruption that Nurgle spreads is not just a disease, it's a force of transformation, a reordering of the universe itself. These planets, once filled with life, are becoming something new entirely. They are living, breathing manifestations of decay, where the very laws of nature are turned upside down and the lines between life and death, reality and unreality, begin to blur. The physical manifestations of Nurgle's corruption are not just a sign of decay. They are the first steps toward the complete transformation of these worlds into true plague worlds, existing simultaneously in both the material realm and the immaterium. And as this corruption continues to spread, the question remains, can anything stop it? Or will these planets eventually become a permanent part of Nurgle's Garden of Decay, where death reigns and reality itself is forever changed? The Plague-Bearers of Nurgle are among the most grotesque, yet strangely captivating of all the daemons in the Warhammer 40k universe. They are not just daemons in the traditional sense, vile, monstrous entities born from the immaterium. No, the Plague-Bearers are something far more insidious. They are the walking, rotting embodiment of decay itself, spreaders of the very corruption that Nurgle thrives upon. These daemons are not just part of his legion, they are his messengers, his tools, and his most dedicated servants, tasked with the spreading of his plagues across the galaxy and into the material realm. At first glance, a plague-bearer might seem like a horrifying monstrosity, its body covered in festering sores, limbs swollen with disease, and its very skin dripping with the filth of Nurgle's influence. These creatures appear to be walking corpses, their flesh perpetually decaying and regenerating in a grotesque cycle. But what is so disturbing about them is not just their physical appearance, it's the way they embody the very essence of Nurgle's power. A plague-bearer is not just a servant of decay, it is decay itself, walking upon the earth. Every step it takes leaves behind a trail of corruption, spreading the influence of Nurgle wherever it goes. But the plague-bearers are not mindless creatures of disease. They are bound to a purpose far greater than their own existence. They are the agents of Nurgle's will, chosen to carry out his divine plan of spreading death and decay to all corners of the galaxy. To Nurgle, decay is not an evil, it is the ultimate form of transformation. It is a natural process, a necessary part of the cycle of life. Through decay, new life can emerge. And the plague-bearers, in their endless, sickening march, are fulfilling this purpose. They are spreading the plague that will one day transform the entire galaxy into a reflection of Nurgle's Garden of Rot. The plague-bearers are not alone in their task. They are part of the vast, sprawling cult of Nurgle, an organization that exists in the dark corners of the galaxy, hidden from the prying eyes of the Imperium and other powers. The cult of Nurgle is a bizarre, twisted society, one that embraces sickness, disease, and decay, not as curses, but as blessings. To be part of Nurgle's cult is to accept the inevitability of decay and death, to embrace the plague and let it become a part of you. These cultists, unlike the followers of other chaos gods, are not driven by rage, bloodlust, or ambition. Instead, they are drawn to Nurgle by a sense of peace, a twisted form of acceptance that comes from the knowledge that all things will eventually rot. There is no need for anger or violence in Nurgle's world, only acceptance, reverence, and the quiet joy of knowing that everything is as it should be. What is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Nurgle's cults is the way in which they actively work to spread his diseases. Unlike the worshippers of other chaos gods, who often use violence and bloodshed to further their dark agendas, Nurgle's cultists are more subtle, more insidious. They do not conquer planets with fire and fury. Instead, they spread their plagues slowly, carefully, letting the disease fester and spread on its own. These cultists infiltrate societies, planting the seeds of corruption where they are least expected. They spread sickness through trade routes, through contaminated food and water, through contact with infected individuals. They might even infect entire populations without the people ever realizing what is happening, letting the sickness take root until it is too late. By the time the inhabitants realize the true extent of the plague, it is already too late. The disease has taken hold, and Nurgle's influence is inevitable. The role of the plague-bearers in this process is crucial. These daemons are not just tools, they are the harbingers of Nurgle's power, spreading the disease wherever they go. Their very presence is enough to corrupt an entire ecosystem, warping the land and the people who live upon it. In fact, it is often said that a single plague-bearer is enough to bring a world to its knees. Wherever they go, they leave behind a trail of decay, infecting everything they touch. And as they spread Nurgle's diseases, they also bring about the slow transformation of the planet itself, warping it into something new, something that exists not just in the material realm, but in the immaterium as well. In fact, some fan theories suggest that the plague-bearers might be the key to understanding how these worlds can exist in both realms. The corruption they spread is so overwhelming, so all-encompassing, that it creates a kind of spiritual resonance. The material world is no longer just a place where flesh and blood exist. It becomes a place where the very essence of decay begins to infect reality itself. The more plague-bearers that infest a planet, the more the line between the material and immaterium begins to blur. These worlds don't just become corrupted. They become points of contact between the two realities, where the rotting influence of Nurgle can spread freely between them. The inner workings of Nurgle's cults are often cloaked in mystery, as they operate in the shadows, far from the eyes of the Imperium. They may seem like peaceful, contented followers of the Plague God, but their obsession with spreading disease and decay is unrelenting. For them, the spread of Nurgle's plagues is not just a task, it is a sacred duty. They see themselves as the agents of a divine process, bringing about the inevitable end of all things. This is not an act of malice, it is a calling. The cultists do not seek to destroy the galaxy, but to transform it. They believe that through the spread of Nurgle's diseases, they are facilitating the necessary decay that will bring about the eventual rebirth of the galaxy. To them, the universe is not a place of life and growth. It is a place that must eventually rot and wither, only to be reborn in a new, twisted form. The Plague-Bearers and Nurgle's cults are two sides of the same coin, one spreading the disease, the other embracing it. Together they form a terrifying force of decay, one that seeks not just to corrupt, but to transform everything it touches. Their influence spreads like a slow, inevitable tide, and no matter how hard the Imperium or any other power might fight against it, they cannot escape the truth of Nurgle's will. All things must decay, and all things must return to the rot from which they came. The Plague-Bearers are the messengers of that truth, and the cultists are the willing participants in its spread. Together, they are the unstoppable force of Nurgle's corruption, and they will not rest until the galaxy itself is nothing but a rotting, festering husk. The Plague Worlds are among the most terrifying and enigmatic planets in the Warhammer 40k universe. They are not just worlds that have been infected by Nurgle's corruption. They are worlds where the very fabric of reality itself begins to break down under the weight of decay and pestilence. The presence of Nurgle on these worlds is so overwhelming that it doesn't just cause biological decay. It warps the very nature of existence, bending time, space, and the laws of nature until they become something unrecognizable, something far darker. On these worlds, the distinction between the material universe and the immaterium becomes increasingly irrelevant. Time itself seems to lose all meaning. Days stretch on endlessly, while sometimes entire cycles of day and night seem to vanish in the blink of an eye. It's as if the flow of time is no longer governed by the laws of physics, but by the whims of decay itself. Some parts of the planet might experience decades of endless sunshine, while other regions are shrouded in a sickly, unending night. And in places, the very concept of time seems to be twisted and warped. Hours could feel like seconds, and what seems like a lifetime could pass in what feels like a mere moment. It's as though time is caught in a cycle of corruption, forever broken and remade by Nurgle's touch. Space itself is no less affected. The landscapes of these worlds seem to defy the natural order, twisting and changing with each passing day. What was once a mountain range may collapse into a vast swamp of filth and decay, while oceans might turn into rolling seas of pus and bile. The laws of gravity might no longer function normally. On some worlds, it is said that entire cities can be found upside down, their streets floating through the air, as though the planet itself has been warped by the power of the immaterium. The very ground beneath your feet might feel unstable, like you're walking on a living, breathing organism that shifts and pulses with every step you take. It's as if the planet itself has become a vessel for Nurgle's disease, a living, rotting entity that no longer conforms to the rules of reality. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the plague worlds is how they seem to exist in both the material world and the immaterium simultaneously. As the corruption of Nurgle spreads, the boundaries between these two realms begin to fade. One moment, you could be standing on solid ground, breathing the fetid air of a planet twisted by disease. But in the next, you could find yourself suddenly slipping between the cracks of reality, caught in a world that seems to pulse with the energy of the immaterium. The laws of physics no longer apply. The air feels thick and oppressive, charged with raw psychic energy. The landscape is not the same as it was just moments ago. It has shifted, becoming a distorted version of itself, where even the stars above seem to flicker in and out of existence. This is not just a world corrupted by Nurgle. It is a world where the fabric of reality itself is breaking down, torn apart by the overwhelming presence of decay. In some places, reality might not just warp in small ways. It might collapse entirely. Entire regions of a plague world could slip entirely into the immaterium, becoming pockets of twisted, chaotic space where time and space themselves are unpredictable. One moment, you might be standing in the midst of a rotting jungle, the air thick with the stench of death, and the next, you could be stumbling through an endless, nightmarish void where the laws of existence cease to function. The landscape may flicker between the material world and the immaterium, constantly shifting as if both realms are vying for dominance. It's as though the planet is being torn between two realities, and neither can fully claim it as its own. The result is a nightmarish, fractured world where the line between life and death, between what is and what could be, is no longer clear. What makes this even more horrifying is the idea that the inhabitants of these worlds, if they haven't succumbed entirely to the plague, are left to experience the horrors of both realities at once. They live in a constant state of flux, slipping between the material world and the immaterium, as if their minds can no longer comprehend where one ends and the other begins. One minute, they could be surrounded by their fellow survivors. The next, they are trapped in a twisted, psychic version of their home, witnessing visions of their own death or the horrors that lurk in the immaterium. Some say that this constant shifting between realities drives the inhabitants of these planets mad, their minds unable to cope with the instability of their existence. What's even more terrifying is that the corruption doesn't just affect the landscape or the people. It seems to warp the very concept of existence itself. The further you venture into a plague world, the more it becomes clear that reality here is not just twisted. It is actively breaking down. There are whispers among the few survivors who still roam these planets. Whispers that speak of entire regions where time no longer flows, where entire cities have been lost to the immaterium, where entire civilizations exist only as echoes, fragments of memory caught between the two realities. The deeper one goes into a plague world, the more the distinction between reality and nightmare fades until they are no longer separate at all. The idea that these planets can exist in both realities at once has led to some fascinating fan theories. Some believe that Nurgle, in his quest to spread decay, is not just spreading his influence across the material universe. He is actively attempting to merge both worlds into one. If Nurgle can cause a planet to exist in both realms, then perhaps he can do the same with the entire galaxy. By merging the material world with the immaterium, Nurgle could create a universe where decay and death are not just inevitable. They are the very essence of existence. In this twisted vision of the universe, reality itself would be suffused with the influence of Nurgle, and all things would exist in a state of constant decay. Others suggest that these dual reality worlds are not the result of Nurgle's power alone, but are a manifestation of the immaterium's inherent instability. The immaterium is not a stable realm. It is a place of raw, chaotic energy, where the very fabric of existence is constantly shifting and changing. Perhaps these worlds exist because the immaterium itself is bleeding into the material world, creating a rift between the two realities that cannot be closed. In this view, Nurgle is merely taking advantage of the instability of the immaterium, spreading his plagues to fuel the collapse of reality itself. One thing is certain, however, these worlds are not just corrupted by disease. They are worlds that have been reshaped by the very power of the immaterium, where the laws of nature no longer apply, and where time, space, and reality itself are in a constant state of flux. These are the worlds where the line between the material and immaterium begins to disappear, leaving behind a nightmare where decay and corruption rule supreme. And as Nurgle's influence continues to spread, there is no telling how far these worlds will slip into the madness that lies between the two realms. One thing is for sure, once a planet becomes a plague world, it can never truly return to what it once was. It will exist in a state of constant decay, forever straddling the boundary between life and death, reality and nightmare. The inhabitants of Nurgle's plague worlds live in a perpetual nightmare, a place where reality itself has been twisted beyond recognition by the plague god's corruptive influence. For them, survival is not just about avoiding death. It is about enduring a slow, unrelenting decay that eats away at their bodies, their minds, and their very souls. These worlds, once home to vibrant civilizations, have become festering breeding grounds for disease and despair. Whether they are human, chaos worshippers, or even demonic entities, the inhabitants of these planets are all bound by the same horrific fate: to live in a world that is as much a part of the immaterium as it is the material realm, where life and death are no longer separate, but part of a continuous cycle of rot and decay. For humans living on these planets, the horrors they face are unimaginable. At first, the plague might seem like an invisible threat, a sickness that spreads through the population in slow, agonizing waves. People might cough, their bodies might weaken, and the air around them becomes thick with the stench of decay. But this is only the beginning. As the corruption takes hold, it becomes clear that the world around them is shifting, warping into something unrecognizable. Buildings that were once solid structures begin to crumble, their foundations eaten away by the pestilence that infects everything. The streets become choked with diseased plants, and the skies above are a swirling mass of toxic fumes. Nature itself seems to be falling apart, and with it, the fabric of reality itself. The people of these worlds often live in a state of confusion, trapped between the decaying material world and the immaterium. Time becomes unreliable, and space itself seems to twist, pulling them into places where they can no longer distinguish between the living world and the horrors of the immaterium. People might find themselves walking through a marketplace one moment, only to be engulfed by an endless void of swirling energies the next. The very air seems to warp, sometimes thick with pestilence, other times thin and crackling with psychic energy. For the humans here, reality itself has become an unstable, ever-shifting nightmare. But what's perhaps most horrifying is that many of these people begin to accept their fate. Nurgle's influence is not just physical, it is psychological too. The longer someone is exposed to the plagues and the decaying world around them, the more they begin to embrace the rot. It is not a violent, furious acceptance. No, it's a slow, creeping resignation. To be alive on a plague world is to know that death is inevitable, that decay is inescapable. But in that acceptance, some people begin to find a twisted comfort. They no longer fear the rot. They embrace it, even find a strange peace in knowing that their fate is sealed. They worship Nurgle, not with the rage and fanaticism seen in other chaos cults, but with a quiet, reverent acceptance. They are not just followers, they are part of the cycle, and they understand that their bodies will rot, but their souls will live on in the eternal decay of Nurgle's domain. For chaos worshippers who have given themselves over to Nurgle's influence, the transformation is more deliberate. These cultists actively seek out the decay, craving the eternal embrace of their god. They see Nurgle as a god of rebirth, not death. Where others see the plague as a curse, they see it as a blessing, a means to transcend the frailty of mortal existence. The more they suffer, the more they are transformed. The plagues are not something to fear. They are the tools through which they will become one with Nurgle. These followers live in constant devotion to their god, spreading disease and corruption wherever they go, eager to see the world around them rot and wither, as they slowly become part of the eternal decay. What's fascinating is that the corruption doesn't just affect the human inhabitants of these worlds, it also shapes the very land and creatures that inhabit them. Demonic entities from Nurgle's realm are drawn to these planets like moths to a flame. They are not just agents of destruction, they are embodiments of Nurgle's power, manifestations of the plague god's will. These daemons are as much a part of the planet as the twisted landscapes themselves, and they interact with the world in ways that no mortal can fully comprehend. They feed on the decay, basking in the rot that permeates the atmosphere. Some daemons take physical form, manifesting as towering, grotesque beasts that roam the planet's surface, spreading the corruption further. Others might exist more subtly, influencing the inhabitants with whispers in the wind or visions of the immaterium. These demonic entities are not invaders. They are part of the planet's transformation, the eternal process of decay that Nurgle seeks to bring to all things. The most horrific part of living on a plague world is that for many, death is not an escape. For the followers of Nurgle, death is merely a step in the transformation. They believe that Nurgle's ultimate gift is not just the end of life, but the beginning of something new. But this transformation is not easy. It's not a peaceful process. It is a slow, agonizing journey into decay. As the body decays, so too does the mind, warped by the endless plague that ravages the planet. The longer the corruption seeps into a person's being, the more they begin to lose their sense of self. It is said that those who live too long under Nurgle's influence eventually become little more than walking corpses, their bodies rotting from the inside out, their minds consumed by the eternal decay of the immaterium. And yet, this is not a fate to be feared. No, for many, it is a goal to strive for. The faithful followers of Nurgle long for the day when their bodies will finally succumb to the plague, for in that moment, they believe they will truly become one with Nurgle, embraced by the god of decay. But not all inhabitants of these worlds accept their fate with such resignation. Some try to resist, to fight back against the overwhelming tide of corruption that threatens to consume them. These people are often the first to fall victim to the plague, as their defiance only makes them more vulnerable to Nurgle's influence. But even in their resistance, they are shaped by the world around them. They cannot escape the corruption. It seeps into their bones, twists their minds, and slowly, inevitably, they begin to succumb to Nurgle's will. The longer they fight, the more they are consumed by the plague. There are no true victories on a plague world, only a slow, inevitable defeat, whether it's through the plague itself or through the slow degradation of their very being. There are some who believe that the inhabitants of these worlds are not just victims of Nurgle's power, but participants in his eternal game. In this view, the corruption is not a punishment, it is a form of cosmic justice, a reminder that all things must decay, all things must return to the rot from which they came. In this twisted view of existence, the inhabitants of these worlds are not victims. They are part of the great cycle of life, death, and decay, fulfilling their ultimate purpose by allowing themselves to be consumed by Nurgle's influence. For them, it is not a curse, it is an honor, a privilege, to be part of Nurgle's eternal garden. In the end, the impact on the inhabitants of Nurgle's plague worlds is profound. They live in a reality that is warped by decay and disease, where the line between life and death, reality and nightmare, is forever blurred. Their bodies rot, their minds unravel, and their souls are consumed by the eternal, unrelenting presence of Nurgle. And yet, many of them find a twisted sense of peace in this corruption. For them, the plague is not an enemy to be defeated. It is the ultimate embrace, a sign of Nurgle's divine will. And in that embrace, they find a terrible, horrifying peace. The Imperium's response to Nurgle's plague worlds is both complex and tragic. As the galaxy's last bastion of order, the Imperium can't afford to ignore the spread of Nurgle's corruption. These planets represent an existential threat, not just because of the diseases that ravage their populations, but because they become a foothold for chaos in the material universe, a place where the barrier between the immaterium and the material world weakens. For the Imperium, the mere existence of these worlds is a sign of Nurgle's creeping influence, and they cannot allow this taint to spread unchecked. The initial reaction from the Imperium is typically swift and brutal. These worlds are seen as lost, irredeemable, and the standard response is to exterminate them, either through planetary bombardment or sterilization campaigns. The idea is simple: purge the taint, burn it with fire, and make sure that nothing can survive to spread the corruption further. The Astra Militarum, the Emperor's own legions of humanity, are often sent to these worlds as part of the Imperial efforts to wipe them from existence. These soldiers fight with grim determination, knowing that the odds are stacked against them. The plagues that cover these worlds are no ordinary diseases. They are sentient, alive, in a way that no mortal plague can be. Every step forward is a battle against the very land itself, which seems to conspire against them, sending sickness and death to wear down their numbers. The Adeptus Astartes, too, are dispatched to cleanse these worlds, but even the mighty Space Marines are often outmatched. These superhuman warriors are equipped with the best weapons the Imperium has to offer, but the nature of the plague they are up against is insidious, capable of slipping through even the toughest of armor. For Space Marines, battling a plague world is an exercise in persistence, but also in survival. Their greatest weapon, of course, is their unwavering loyalty to the Emperor and their desire to protect humanity. But even they are not immune to the debilitating effects of Nurgle's influence. Many of these warriors return from these missions wounded, not in body, but in mind, touched by the corruption that spreads so effortlessly through the air. Yet, despite the best efforts of the Imperium, Nurgle's influence continues to grow. The very strategies employed to cleanse these worlds may be inadvertently strengthening the plague god's power. For one, the nature of Nurgle's corruption is such that the more the Imperium tries to purge these worlds, the more it feeds into his domain. The bombardments that are meant to cleanse the surface only serve to spread the plague further. Every strike, every attempt to sterilize the planet, releases more of Nurgle's energies into the atmosphere, allowing his influence to creep into the Immaterium and even to other parts of the galaxy. It's as if by trying to destroy the source, the Imperium only feeds it. Every world bombarded by Imperial forces becomes another step in Nurgle's march toward domination, as the Immaterium bleeds through cracks in reality, spreading his rot further. Fan theories suggest that this is, in some ways, the nature of Nurgle's plan all along. The more the Imperium fights back, the more Nurgle grows stronger. Nurgle doesn't just want to spread disease. He wants to create a universe where death and decay are inevitable, where even the most powerful forces in the galaxy are powerless against his influence. The Imperium's efforts to cleanse these worlds only make them more of a focus of Nurgle's power, pushing the galaxy closer to the tipping point where reality itself begins to rot away. In this way, Nurgle's ultimate goal may not be the destruction of the Imperium, but its gradual transformation into another plague world, consumed by decay and disease, existing both in the material world and the Immaterium at once. It's also worth noting that the Imperium's reaction to these worlds is often more than just strategic, it's deeply ideological. The Imperium's leaders, especially those in the high echelons of the Ecclesiarchy and the Adeptus Terra, view any form of corruption as not just a threat to the material world, but to the very spiritual fabric of the galaxy. To them, Nurgle's plague is an affront to the Emperor's will and the sanctity of life. They believe that decay is a rejection of the Emperor's divine creation, and that even the mere existence of such worlds is a direct challenge to the Imperium's rightful rule. There is an almost religious fervor in their desire to wipe out these tainted worlds, an unwavering belief that the purity of the galaxy must be preserved at all costs, even if it means sacrificing entire populations in the process. However, there's a paradox here, one that many fans have debated for years. The more the Imperium tries to stamp out Nurgle's influence, the more it inadvertently aids his cause. The very nature of Nurgle's corruption is that it thrives on suffering. His followers, humans, chaos worshippers, and daemons alike, feed on the suffering of others, and the more the Imperium reacts with violence and aggression, the more Nurgle's power grows. The wars, the bombardments, the unrelenting campaigns to wipe out the corruption only spread the plague further, making the Imperium's response as much a part of Nurgle's plan as the disease itself. It's almost as if the plague god is toying with the Imperium, drawing them into a trap that they can't escape. Each time the Imperium tries to stamp out the corruption, it only spreads further, creating more dual reality worlds, more pockets of reality where Nurgle's influence can bleed into the material universe. These worlds, once bombarded and left to rot, become even more entrenched in the Immaterium, and the cycle continues, making the Imperium's efforts seem almost futile in the grand scheme of things. The irony here is bitter. The more the Imperium tries to destroy these worlds, the more it actually contributes to their spread. In a way, Nurgle has won before the battle even begins. His power is insidious, and his presence in the galaxy grows not just through open conflict, but through the very attempts of his enemies to stop him. This, in itself, might be one of Nurgle's most subtle and terrifying abilities. His ability to thrive in the chaos of battle, in the destruction caused by his enemies. He doesn't need to strike directly. He just needs to wait, and in the meantime, his influence seeps through every effort to stop him, twisting it into another victory for his cause. As the Imperium faces these worlds, their options become fewer and fewer. There's no clear answer to how to deal with Nurgle's plague worlds. No matter how many are destroyed, more will inevitably rise in their place. And as the galaxy becomes more and more infected by Nurgle's touch, it raises the question: how long can the Imperium keep fighting before the very foundation of reality itself begins to crumble? How much longer before the forces of decay and disease become so intertwined with the material universe that there's no way to separate them again? The Imperium is locked in a battle that seems as much against the fabric of reality as it is against Nurgle's forces, and the longer they fight, the more they help the Plague God achieve his ultimate goal: the spread of rot, death, and decay across the entire galaxy. Nurgle, the Plague God, is a figure shrouded in mystery, even within the chaotic halls of the Immaterium. While Khorne revels in bloodshed, Tzeentch manipulates the threads of fate, and Slaanesh indulges in excess, Nurgle's ultimate goals are far more elusive and complex. His domain is not one of immediate destruction or grand, visible conflict. Nurgle's realm is one of slow, insidious decay. His ultimate plans are often interpreted in many ways, with some seeing them as a mere extension of his obsession with decay, while others speculate that they're part of a much greater cosmic design that transcends mere pestilence. One of the most popular fan theories revolves around the idea that Nurgle is attempting to create a permanent bridge between the material universe and the Immaterium. This theory is grounded in the nature of the plague worlds themselves, planets that are not just infected by his corruption, but where reality itself begins to warp, creating a dual existence. If Nurgle's corruption spreads unchecked, the theory goes, then more and more planets will begin to exist in both realms simultaneously, blurring the lines between the material world and the Immaterium. Eventually, this could lead to the complete merging of both realms, allowing Nurgle to spread his corruption throughout the galaxy in a way that goes beyond simple diseases or plagues. Rather, the entire fabric of reality itself would be altered, reshaping the universe into a permanent reflection of Nurgle's rot. This theory hinges on the idea that Nurgle's ultimate goal is not simply to spread death, but to merge the boundaries between life and death, reality and unreality. In this view, Nurgle is not simply looking to corrupt the living, he's trying to reshape the entire universe into a place where decay is the natural state of being. It's said that in his vision, all things will eventually rot, whether they are living organisms, planets, or even the stars themselves. But Nurgle's twisted view of decay isn't one of finality. It is a continuous, eternal process, a cycle where decay and death become not an end, but a beginning. To Nurgle, decay is not an evil force to be eradicated. It is the ultimate form of existence, a necessary process that leads to the rebirth of all things. His plague worlds, in this theory, are a step toward making this vision a reality, a permanent transition where death and decay reign supreme, but where life itself is never truly gone, only transformed. Another fan theory posits that Nurgle's greater plan is not about creating a bridge between the material and Immaterium realms at all, but about bringing about a cosmic rebirth, one that transcends the destruction of the material universe. According to this view, Nurgle sees the galaxy as a kind of garden, one that has become overrun with disease and decay. But this decay isn't a sign of the galaxy's end. It's the precursor to a new, twisted form of life. For Nurgle, the process of corruption and decay isn't a death sentence, but the first step in a larger cosmic cycle of transformation. The plague worlds are, in this theory, just the first stage in a grand rebirth. By spreading his plagues across the galaxy, Nurgle is not just killing, he is preparing the universe for a new kind of existence, one that is free from the constraints of the living, where death and decay are not to be feared, but embraced. In this view, the plague worlds serve as sanctuaries of Nurgle's power, places where life and death merge, where his influence can grow unchecked. Over time, as more and more planets fall under his sway, the entire galaxy will become a new form of life. A vast, rotting ecosystem where all things exist in a constant state of decay. But rather than seeing this as a negative fate, Nurgle's followers view it as a form of salvation. They believe that by embracing decay, they will transcend the limitations of mortality, becoming eternal in their transformation. It's a strange, twisted form of immortality, where life is continually reborn through the process of decay. A more darkly philosophical fan theory suggests that Nurgle's plan is rooted in his desire to prove that decay is the ultimate truth of the universe, that all things, no matter how powerful, are doomed to rot. This theory posits that Nurgle, in his eternal pursuit of corruption, is not simply trying to spread disease or create a new reality. Instead, he seeks to prove that everything, whether it's the might of the Imperium or the grandeur of the Eldar, is ultimately just a fleeting, fragile thing destined for decay. His followers see this as a deeply nihilistic message, that no matter how hard you try to resist, all things will eventually wither away. This view frames Nurgle not as a god of suffering, but as a cosmic teacher, showing that nothing is truly permanent. To him, decay is the natural state of the universe. His ultimate goal is to spread this truth to all corners of the galaxy, forcing everyone to accept that no empire, no species, no power is immune to the ravages of time. An even more unsettling theory suggests that Nurgle's greater plan might not even be limited to the material universe. In this theory, Nurgle's true goal is to bring the entirety of reality under his influence, making both the immaterium and the material world a reflection of his power. Nurgle's plague worlds are seen not as mere experiments, but as an attempt to create a living, decaying universe, one where all things exist in a constant state of entropy and transformation. This would mean that Nurgle isn't just trying to corrupt individual planets or civilizations. He is working to reshape the very foundation of existence itself. The galaxies, the stars, even the laws of nature would all be rewritten in Nurgle's image. The immaterium, with its raw psychic power, would no longer be a separate chaotic realm. It would become a part of the material universe, permeating all of reality with the influence of decay. The result would be a universe where nothing is stable, nothing is permanent, and everything is in a constant state of flux, forever trapped in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Each of these theories offers a different perspective on Nurgle's ultimate goals, but all share one common thread. Nurgle's plan is far grander and more complex than simply spreading disease. Whether he is attempting to merge the material and immaterium realms, create a cosmic rebirth, or prove the inevitable decay of all things, his influence is a slow, creeping force that works quietly and methodically. Nurgle does not seek immediate destruction. Instead, he wants to reshape the very nature of existence itself. It's this patient, insidious plan that makes him one of the most terrifying chaos gods of all. His corruption doesn't just tear down the walls of reality. It seeps into everything until even the concept of reality itself becomes warped and decayed beyond recognition. And as the plague worlds grow, as Nurgle's power spreads, the galaxy may one day wake up to find itself irrevocably changed, twisted into a reflection of Nurgle's eternal garden of rot. The idea that Nurgle's plague worlds could serve as gateways between the material universe and the immaterium is a chilling one, but when you step back and look at the bigger picture, it begins to make sense in the twisted cosmic framework that Nurgle and the other chaos gods inhabit. These worlds, already so corrupted and unstable, could act as conduits, places where the boundaries between the two realms begin to weaken and ultimately dissolve. In a universe where the immaterium is a constant presence, full of psychic energy and demonic horrors, It seems almost inevitable that these worlds would eventually become key points of access between the material world and the warp. And it's not just Nurgle who could benefit from this. The other Chaos Gods, too, might see these worlds as crucial stepping stones in their never-ending battle for dominance. To understand this idea fully, we have to consider the nature of both the material world and the immaterium. The material world, the universe as we know it, is governed by the laws of physics. Time flows, space is structured, and reality is tangible, albeit in a constant state of flux. The immaterium, on the other hand, is a realm of raw, unshaped psychic energy, where thoughts, emotions, and desires create the landscape. It's a place where anything is possible, but it is also unstable, chaotic, and dangerous. Normally, the two realms exist separately, and their boundaries are well defined. But what happens when that boundary is breached? What happens when a planet, one so thoroughly saturated by Nurgle's corruption, exists in both realms simultaneously? Fan theories around this often speculate that these plague worlds are not just infected by Nurgle's diseases, but by the very essence of the immaterium itself. As Nurgle's influence seeps deeper into the material universe, his power begins to unravel the fabric of reality. These planets, as they are corrupted, become more than just physical spaces. They become conduits between the two realms. Some theorists even believe that Nurgle might be deliberately trying to create these rifts, hoping to merge the material universe with the immaterium entirely, bringing about a reality where death, decay, and rebirth are no longer separate. It would be a universe where all things are constantly in a state of flux, where the boundaries between life and death are blurred, and where reality itself is as corrupt and decayed as Nurgle's garden. But these dual existence worlds are not just stepping stones for Nurgle's plans. The other Chaos Gods, too, could see their potential. Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways, is a master of manipulation and subtlety. He would likely see these rifts as an opportunity to further his own schemes, using the instability of the plague worlds to create new pathways for his influence to seep into the material universe. His followers, already adept at bending the fabric of reality, might seek to manipulate these worlds for their own ends, taking advantage of the openings between the two realms to twist fate and alter the course of history. The more unstable the fabric of reality becomes, the easier it is for Tzeentch to weave his webs of deceit, pulling strings and shaping outcomes in ways that could destabilize entire systems. Khorne, too, might find these rifts appealing, though for very different reasons. The blood god thrives on conflict, destruction, and violence. The more these worlds exist in a state of flux, the more chaos they create. Khorne's forces could use the instability to feed their hunger for battle, erupting in violence that spills over into both realms. His followers would revel in the suffering and destruction caused by the chaos of a dual reality world, using it as a breeding ground for bloodshed. In this way, these worlds could serve as theaters for conflict, where the forces of Khorne can fight, kill, and spill blood, not just in the material world, but across the shifting landscapes of the immaterium as well. Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Excess, might have a more subtle, but no less significant interest in these worlds. Where the other Chaos Gods might seek to use these realities as tools of power and destruction, Slaanesh might see them as places of indulgence, where the boundaries between pleasure and pain, life and death, are so blurred that they become one and the same. The corruption of Nurgle, with its promise of rebirth through decay, might resonate deeply with Slaanesh's followers, who seek to indulge every aspect of existence, including the most taboo or perverse. For Slaanesh, these worlds could be places of endless indulgence, where the very act of existence becomes an experience of sensory overload, where the pain of decay is as pleasurable as the ecstasy of life. But Nurgle's true design with these worlds, perhaps, is not just to create opportunities for the other Chaos Gods, it's to establish a permanent foothold in the material universe. The process of decay that he spreads, the way it warps reality itself, could eventually lead to a place where the very laws of existence are rewritten. If Nurgle's corruption continues unchecked, these planets might no longer just be in both realities. They might become a permanent part of the immaterium itself. As the boundary between the two realms continues to dissolve, the plague worlds could act as a permanent bridge, where the forces of chaos can pour into the material universe at will, reshaping reality into something unrecognizable. And yet, there's something more insidious about this idea. These dual-existence worlds might not just serve as gateways for the gods, they might be instruments of change for the universe itself. As the fabric of reality weakens and more worlds begin to slip between the two realms, the galaxy could become a place where time no longer flows in a linear fashion, where the laws of nature break down entirely. The universe, once a structured place governed by the rules of physics, could become a place where decay is the natural state, where reality is constantly shifting and changing, and where existence itself becomes a never-ending cycle of birth, death, and decay. This isn't just about Nurgle spreading his influence across the galaxy. This is about the very nature of existence being rewritten. These worlds act as the first step in a grand transformation, one that might see the universe remade in Nurgle's image. A universe where all things exist in a state of decay, where life and death are not separate, but part of the same continuous, rotting cycle. And as more worlds become tainted, as more planets slip between the two realities, the more Nurgle's power grows. Eventually, the universe itself might cease to be a place where the forces of life and death are distinct. Instead, it would become a place where everything is part of Nurgle's eternal garden, a garden of rot and rebirth, where decay reigns supreme, and the boundary between the material world and the immaterium is forever gone. Fan theories abound about how Nurgle might achieve this grand design. Some believe that his plague worlds are merely the beginning, that as more worlds exist in both realms, the very nature of reality will begin to collapse. Others believe that Nurgle has a deeper, more subtle plan, a slow, inevitable transformation of the galaxy into a place where decay is the only constant, where the material world and the immaterium merge into one twisted whole. Regardless of the specifics, one thing is clear. Nurgle's plague worlds are not just infected planets. They are the foundation for something far greater, a transformation that will forever change the nature of existence itself. In the end, these worlds serve as much more than just outposts for the forces of chaos. They are key points in Nurgle's plan to reshape reality itself, to create a universe where decay and death are the natural state, where the material and immaterium are no longer separate, and where the influence of Nurgle spreads across all of existence. These worlds are not just gateways, they are the beginning of something far darker and more profound. And if Nurgle's plan succeeds, the entire galaxy might one day find itself trapped in a cycle of decay, where the boundaries between life and death, reality and unreality, are forever blurred. As we wrap up our journey through the decaying, pestilent realms of Nurgle's plague worlds, it's impossible to ignore the sheer gravity of the concept we've explored. The idea that these worlds could exist in both the material universe and the immaterium. It's a chilling thought, one that forces us to confront the very nature of reality itself. These worlds, once thriving planets, now twisted into places of eternal rot, are more than just manifestations of disease. They are living gateways between two realities, a direct conduit for the influence of chaos and Nurgle's insidious corruption. What does it mean, though, to have a world that straddles two realms? The material universe, where matter, time, and space exist, and the immaterium, a place of raw psychic energy, emotion, and madness. Are these worlds a reflection of the collapse of the barriers between the two? Or are they merely a sign of Nurgle's insidious growth, a way for his influence to spread unchecked, infecting not just flesh and bone, but the very essence of existence? If Nurgle's plague worlds are indeed dual existence worlds, where the boundaries between the real and the unreal are constantly bleeding into one another, it raises the terrifying possibility that the rest of the galaxy could eventually suffer the same fate. These worlds are not just examples of decay, they are the harbingers of a greater change, a transformation that will eventually consume everything, everywhere, until there is no more material reality, only the endless, rotting embrace of Nurgle's domain. What makes Nurgle so terrifying isn't just the death he brings, it's the way he takes his time. He isn't interested in explosive immediate destruction like Khorne or Tzeentch. Nurgle's corruption is a slow burn, a gradual erosion of reality itself. The nature of his power doesn't demand the universe to be destroyed in an instant. It calls for a slow, inevitable transformation that bends everything to his will. And the more we understand about the nature of his plague worlds, the more it becomes clear. This isn't just a simple disease spreading across the galaxy. Nurgle is trying to reshape the universe, to bring the material world into his domain of decay. Every plague world is a stepping stone. Every infected planet a part of his grand, unspeakable design. In Nurgle's eyes, decay is not a curse. It's the natural order of things. And it's an order that, sooner or later, will come for everything. There's no escape, no cure. The more the Imperium fights, the more it feeds into his plans. The more they destroy, the more they enable him to spread his corruption. It's a trap that's been set, and the galaxy, in its arrogance, may not even realize it until it's too late. Of course, this is all part of what makes Nurgle so incredibly compelling to many fans. While Khorne's bloodlust is simple and easy to grasp, and Tzeentch's schemes are as convoluted as they are mind-bending, Nurgle's philosophy speaks to something darker and more insidious. His followers find a twisted peace in his rot, and the nature of his power is a constant reminder that decay is inevitable. Nothing in the galaxy can resist it forever. Whether it's the unimaginable horrors of a plague world or the quiet, creeping madness of the inhabitants who live there, Nurgle's legacy is one of slow, patient destruction. The corruption doesn't happen overnight, and that's what makes it so terrifying. It's not a wave that crashes over you. It's a tide that rises inch by inch until you look around and realize that everything has been submerged. Some fans have speculated that Nurgle's true purpose isn't just to corrupt the material world, but to reshape reality itself into something that mirrors his domain. A world where death and decay are not ends, but part of an eternal cycle, a process of continual transformation. Could it be that Nurgle is not seeking to destroy the universe, but to make it more like his Garden of Rot? What if his ultimate goal is not to bring about the end of all things, but the rebirth of all things through decay? These dual existence worlds, as warped as they are, may be the first step toward that rebirth. They may be the initial fractures in reality, the cracks in the fabric of existence that will eventually widen, making the material universe and the immaterium indistinguishable. The galaxy may one day find itself not destroyed, but forever changed, remade in Nurgle's image. For others, the idea of Nurgle's plan is more cosmic in scale, something that seeks to prove the inevitability of decay on a universal level. The endless spread of his plague is not merely an act of destruction, but an act of cosmic justice. If all things are destined to rot and die, then Nurgle's ultimate purpose is to remind the universe of this fact. The galaxy, with its empires and civilizations, is nothing more than a fleeting moment in the eternal process of decay. Everything, no matter how grand or mighty, will eventually succumb to Nurgle's influence. His plague worlds are reminders of this inescapable truth. There is no escape from decay, no future without rot, only the eternal cycle, where death and rebirth are one and the same. But as unsettling as this view may be, it's also what makes Nurgle's presence in the Warhammer 40k universe so compelling. While the other Chaos gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, are all driven by desire, power, or indulgence, Nurgle's goal is something deeper, more subtle. His obsession with decay, his love of rot, is not just about destruction. It's about the ultimate nature of the universe. It's about embracing the inevitable. And in a way, that makes Nurgle the most patient, the most enduring of all the Chaos gods. As we step back and reflect on the dual existence worlds that Nurgle has created, we are forced to confront the possibility that the entire galaxy is on the brink of a transformation. These worlds are not just infected. They are changing, bleeding into the immaterium, and perhaps soon the material universe will follow. What does that mean for the inhabitants of these worlds, for the Imperium, for the galaxy itself? It's unclear. What is clear is that Nurgle's power is growing, and his influence is spreading, one infected planet at a time. And perhaps, just maybe, he's not trying to destroy everything after all. Maybe he's trying to remake it in his image, where death, decay, and rebirth are all part of one eternal cycle, an endless garden of rot. If you want to keep exploring the deepest corners of the Warhammer 40k universe, if you want to learn more about the Dark Gods and their unimaginable plans, make sure to subscribe. We'll continue to delve into the mysteries of the Immaterium, the secrets of chaos, and the ultimate fate of the galaxy. The journey into the heart of darkness is just beginning, and you won't want to miss a single step.